And as an extra special episode, we have Joe Williams, frequent Song of Ages podcast guest. And Joe was here for this extra special episode to talk about some of our guilty pleasure albums. As you all know, my podcast is really about my favorite albums, but occasionally I have some albums or songs that I love, but don't want to admit in public, or I wouldn't admit to anyone except to the great Joe Williams. So, Joe, this is your third time, I believe, on the podcast. Welcome back. How are you?
Oh, doing good. And if I get up to five, do I get like a special jacket like the SNL Five Timers Club?
Of course, you get a special jacket and a matching dildo. Yes, that will
Yes,
be the gift that we're going to give out.
that is good. I thought I was just going to get one of your old Steely Dan t-shirts, but that's even better.
You'll get the one that says Slang of Ages. Is this a Def Leppard album? Yes, that one. Joe, how is your summer going? Tell us about what you're doing this summer.
Oh, it's going by way too fast. I'm still trying to revise the play that I've been working on, and just got back from a camping trip. So nothing happened last weekend in terms of creativity.
So basically, you wasted your time in the woods with men frolicking.
Absolutely, depending upon how you define wasted.
So we talked last time about your play, and of course, you're an author of a published novel, and you have another novel coming out. Do you know the title of that novel yet? The second novel?
I haven't decided yet. Those are like the worst. I could write the whole novel, but I can't come up with like a title ever for anything that I write.
Well, that's just sad, but at least you got the novel done, so I congratulate you. So, since you have nothing else to talk about, let's jump into our list of guilty pleasures, and you are up first, Joe.
Okay, so my number five, and it's ironic that we have our guilty pleasure list when both of us show no shame on anything, but evidently these are the things that can do it. And I'm not even sure if I feel shame for this because he is a beloved figure, and that is anything by Weird Al Yankovic, is my guilty pleasure. No, I just love that guy, and I will watch anything that he does and anything he puts out.
Wow, that's extremely disappointing. Um, I
How could you not love Weird Al?
Well, the fact is that the man was able to have several hit songs based on prior hit songs and get a lot of permission to do the songs. I know that I was reading his bio that he had reached out to Paul McCartney, sorry, Sir Paul McCartney, and even Prince. And Prince was actually a fan of Weird Al, but Prince refused to let him do any of Prince's songs. And same for Paul McCartney. So give me one of your favorite songs by Weird Al.
No, I will have to say I Lost on Jeopardy is my favorite. The first one that I actually saw of him back in the MTV days is kind of parody of the Greg Kihn classic Jeopardy.
Mhm.
And I think what makes him especially good is not just the songs, but you really have to watch the videos to get the full Weird Al, effect. That is, if you look at like the attention to detail that he has, all the small little inside jokes, it's someone who gets the parody form down, not just of the song, but also the video that it's based on.
I wonder if there were not video representations of the songs, would they be as funny?
I tried to listen to them just for the songs, and they're actually catchy kind of songs, but they would definitely not be as good without the videos and probably would lose probably at least half of their impact. I think the videos and just the persona of Weird Al is what makes the videos and the songs.
Well, that's really interesting. This is a music podcast, but thank you for that, Joe. All right, well,
Well,
one down. I'm going to go with my guilty pleasure, my next guilty pleasure. And this one I had to think about for a while because I am almost embarrassed to admit that I love it, despite the fact that millions and millions of Americans, no, millions and millions of people around the world love this song. It's as a single sold 4.2 million copies. and it is "I Want to Dance with Somebody" by Whitney Houston.
Oh, that is an interesting choice. I was not one I would expect. I suspect you bought like 4 million of those copies yourself.
This is from what album was from this? I don't even know what album it was from. It was from her second album, which I think was called Whitney in 1987. It was written by God, what was the guy people's names? It was written by Shannon Rubicam and George Morel of the band Boy Meets Girl. And it was, of course, produced by the great Geraldo Michael Walden, who produced and wrote most of the last Journey album and toured with Journey on their last tour till he had a heart attack. Anyway, so the story behind the song is they had written another famous song from her first album. I don't remember which one it was. It was one of those dance songs, and it was really popular. And they decided to write another song, and they presented it to the record company, who initially did not like the song, and then presented to Geraldo Michael Walden, who also did not like the song. They then presented to Amit Arrogant, who was the CEO of the record company. He loved the song, and he played it again for the producer Michael Walden, and they said, "Okay, we'll put it on." No one was expecting to be a great big hit, and of course, like I said, 4.2 million copies, an infectious dance beat. It's mostly synth programming and Whitney Houston's vocal arrangement and the backing vocals by her and by a few background singers. So musically, it is cotton candy, but it's good cotton candy. It will rot your brain, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think all that facts are very good, but the image that I can't get out of my mind is, someone that you were dating at the time at the kind of gay bar, and he was dancing very enthusiastically to this song while you had a mortified look on your face. And for me, no matter how catchy that song is, that's the image that is always going to be in my mind, with that.
Oh, that's yeah, it's cinched in my mind.
Yeah.
The shame and embarrassment, which I'll never live down. So thank you for that. Your next
And
song, Joe.
yes, but before we go on, we should also give a plug to the good David Byrne cover of that song, which is excellent.
Oh, right. Yeah. I remember
Which
that.
is, yeah, and it's a sign of a good song that if a completely different artist can do a version of it that is equally as good, it is telling of the quality of the song.
Yeah, you're right. He did do a version of that, which was fantastic. And I'm sure more people are used to covering his songs being covered by them, by other artists, and not him covering artists. But he did a great job with that. So, all right, number 2 for you.
Yeah, so the kind of next one on my list, and evidently I didn't know we were going down. I was going up. So
You can
this is
go
going to be
any
number
direction you want to
4.
go. I mean,
And
shame
this
is
is probably
shame.
the Yes, this is probably the one on my list that I'm actually truly ashamed, of. And the moment I realized that I was ashamed of this song was back when I was a graduate student, and I went into my indie phase where I was that guy, who would talk about his indie bands and have this kind of superior attitude because I like the indie stuff and
I'm
not the
cool.
popular stuff. And I was talking to a friend on my cell phone while driving, and all of a sudden on my mixtape, that's how old it was. It was my mixtape. Sussudio starts playing by Phil Collins. And, I wasn't thinking about it. And all of a sudden, this friend who I probably had, shamed a few times with her music choices said, "Is that Phil Collins Sussudio in the background?" And I felt this deep moment of shame. So that makes it worthy of my guilty pleasure.
That's a great story, and it is a guilty pleasure. Sussudio, I mean, I'll admit this. First of all, I love Genesis through the entire phase of Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins and Ray Wilson. I thought the Ray Wilson album was great. Phil Collins solo albums, the first album, which I think was Face Value, the divorce album, was
Yeah.
great. The second album was very good. The third album, I don't remember which one that was, but it was very good. Then he got to No Jacket Required, and there were I would say they were probably most of the album was very strong, but not Sussudio. And
Hmm.
here's the thing about the song. It musically is really paper thin in my mind. It has the drum program. There's no real drums. It's Phil Collins drum program. It has the Oppenheim synthesizer, the Mini Moog, and the Oppenheim DMX by David Frank, who's a great dance producer and a great writer. It has Daryl Strummer on guitars, like he's on most Phil Collins stuff, and the Phoenix horns, which were the Earth, Wind, and Fire horns before he stole them. But it seems really a thin song musically, not much of a backbeat in my mind, but people loved it, loved dancing to it. And then, of course, you have the dumb as fuck lyrics, which were actually lyrics which were dummy lyrics that would sing he sang, and then he was hoping to replace him, but he never found a replacement for the lyrics.
Yeah, I always find that like amazing that this kind of stand-in kind of sound
Mm-hmm.
made it through it. He couldn't think of like one better phrase than Sussudio. After thinking about how to make the song better, he decided there's just no way. And I think fact that Sussudio is it the song's name and means
Mm-hmm.
absolutely nothing is the perfect summation of the song. But it's still brilliant.
Well, brilliant's
Okay.
overstatement. It is
Yeah, maybe not brilliant, but it's number four.
it is like herpes. I mean, you catch it, you can't get rid of it. That's what it is. And my thing about the album, No Jacket Required, I think it was 1985. January 1985 is when it came out. It came out at a time when another album which was truly great came out, and it beat it for the record of the year and the Grammy album of the year in Grammys. It was out the same time Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits was. And I don't know how you could possibly listen to No Jacket Required and Brothers in Arms and think that No Jacket Required is a better album. That is nuts. But millions of people would disagree with me.
And if Brother in Arms had Sussudio on it, it would have won that Grammy. I guarantee it.
Well, Brothers in Arms did have Money for Nothing, which really wasn't a great song, but it had a great hook and a great story and a great video.
Now that we say it, I want nothing more than to hear Mark Knopfler do a version of Sussudio in concert.
Next time you see him, hold up a sign that says Sussudio and have him throw a guitar at you.
Yes, with that moment when all the audience just shouts out songs for no purpose because it's not going to be sung, I'm going to shout Sussudio.
And I'll yell Private Dancer, but that's another
Yes.
story. All right, so I'm going to go to an album which I truly love. The critics hate it. It's sold reasonably well. It had at least one hit song, and that is the album Give My Regards to Broad Street by the great Sir Paul McCartney. And what he did was he made a retrospective album, which included some old songs from his solo career, his Wings days, his Beatle days, and he did one or two new songs. So he did the song Good Day Sunshine by the Beatles. He did Here, There, and Everywhere by the Beatles. He did For No One, Eleanor Rigby, and Long and Winding Road by the Beatles. And those versions, some of them were okay. I mean, Long and Winding Road, he did like a lazy club jazz way, and it was schlocky. Yesterday was wonderful. Good Day Sunshine was wonderful. He did the song, what was it called? Jeez. Um, Ballroom Dancing from Tug of War. And the version he did on Give My Broads to Broad Street was absolutely amazing. The song actually swung, and it had the great Dave Edmunds on it and Chris Spedding on guitar. And I guess most people know the song "No More Lonely Nights," which was a brand new song. Which I don't think I've ever seen him do that in concert, but David Gilmour on guitar, just a wonderful song. So it is an acquired taste, but I love the album. I love the most of the Beatles songs, and the new songs were really good.
Yeah, I really love No More Lonely Nights. I think that's a great one. Although it reminds me of Yesterday to a good degree if you ever kind of listen to those kind of close to one another. So if I was going to do a Paul McCartney guilty pleasure, it would be Spies Like Us, the
Oh,
theme song from that Dan Aykroyd film that was really bad.
damn, that's a good one. That's a deep cut. I would have
Yes.
probably also gone with Press to Play, which was the album he did with the guys from 10cc right before he had his like big comeback in terms of albums. But yeah, that's Spies Like Us would be a good choice too. All right, you're up.
Okay, my number three choice is a film soundtrack to a film called Zero Patience. It's a little known indie film, I think a Canadian film, about the time when the AIDS crisis was, in its early stages, and when the kind of community was more consumed with finding patient zero, like the first person who brought the AIDS virus over to America, kind of based on the And the Boys Played On film.
Right.
But the soundtrack is this wonderful poppy Pet Shop Boys slash Erasure type music,
Mhm.
which you would think for like a more serious, topic, even though it took more of a tongue in cheek type of approach, to it. But what makes it in my guilty pleasure list is, one, they have catchy songs. For instance, there's a song called Papa Boner about, getting erections in bathhouses for like an indie film with these kind of poppy, catchy vibe. And not only did they like it once, but they brought it back for at least a couple reprises in the soundtrack as well. And also a song called the Butthole Duet, which is if you see the movie, it's about like two singing buttholes, trying to have sex with each other, but one's like a prim, proper English butthole, and one's like a American, more free, type of one. But it's also
Loose
a
and a
super
butthole.
catchy song. Yes. So that makes my kind of guilty pleasure list for three, but it's not really guilty pleasure because it's great music, as well.
God. This was a PG podcast. I think you just moved
Yeah.
it to a R or NC-17 or what the hell
Yes.
to call it.
Yes.
I do
But you
not.
brought up the dildos first, so really you get the
Oh,
blame.
yeah, blame it on me. I do not
Yes.
know this album. I've heard of it. I don't have it, so I'm glad that you brought it. I brought it up. I'll have to look for it.
Yes, you must check it out, and I'm sure you will badmouth it in a future episode.
Ah, I would never do that to your behind your back. I do it to your face. Anyway, my next album is an unusual choice. And I noticed that with my podcast, the Slang of Ages podcast, which is named after a Walter Becker, Donald Fagen song, Slang of Ages, by the way, Joe. I've noticed that with this podcast, I have a lot of dead artists on it that I feature. Occasionally there's some new music like 2023, 2022, but a lot of old music or people who are dead. And this artist died a few years ago. Yet he was the founding member and leader of one of the biggest bands in the world. And this is, of course, the great late Glenn Frey. And the album is After Hours, which was his last studio solo album released in 2012. The album is a album of covers with one exception. The title song was a song that he wrote with the great Jack Temshin, his writing partner for solo work. And Jack also wrote, of course, Peaceful Easy Feeling for the Eagles. The album features a telling of the American songbook, and Fry sang his ass off. He co-produced the album. He didn't play any instruments on it, didn't pick up a guitar, didn't play piano. He just worked on his vocals. And for the most part, his vocals were pretty outstanding. The album did not do well. In fact, I think only two solo albums by Glenn Frey really did well. The first one, which was called No Fun Allowed, and the second one, which was called something I don't remember. But this was a great album, and I think it reached number 116 on the American chart. But he just did a great job singing. He picked some really weird songs. For example, he picked Randy Newman's Same Girl, the song Same Girl, which is from one of Randy's more famous albums. And that was a song where basically the guy's talking about dissolution of relationship where he got her addicted to heroin. So just romantic yet really dark. He did The Shadow of Your Smile, which was covered by Frank Sinatra, and his version was simply gorgeous. Fry's version. The hit single, if you can call it that, was Route 66. He does. I love the album. I listen to it regularly, and I miss Glenn Fry. And you know that he could never have done something like this with the Eagles because Henley would have made fun of him. But it's a great album. No, so you must check it out. After Hours by Glenn Fry.
And we'll have to listen to that one. I'm not very familiar with that particular one. I didn't really start to listen to Glenn Fry's solo stuff until more of the MTV era, Beverly Hills Cop, Miami
Oh,
Vice era type of things. So
oh,
I will have
boy.
to listen to the others. And
Oh.
usually, I haven't liked as many cover, bands or covers, cover albums. But ironically, one of my choices is going to be, heavy on the kind of covers as well.
Mm. Yeah, this album, After Hours, came out the same time as Paul McCartney's cover album came out. Of course, Paul McCartney's album sold a lot more. So, all right, what's your next pick?
Now, speaking of an album of covers, I'm going to go with one person I think is one of the most underrated artists of our time, and that is Yoko Ono. Her two albums, Yes, I'm a Witch and Yes, I'm a Witch 2, in which she teamed up with my beloved indie bands. And they did covers of her own songs, but I like that they kept her original vocals for almost all the tracks and then just, added different types of mixes, towards it. But it gives you an idea of like the great, songwriting that is there. Like the kind of highlights for me are there's a song that she does with Peaches, which is "Kiss, Kiss, Kiss," and there is "Every Man, Every Woman," with the by the Blow Ups, which are great kind of cover versions. And I think she gets unfairly maligned. One, I think she had negative things because obviously like, she was the one who broke up the Beatles, and this is a podcast, but I still did air quotes anyway. Actually see that.
Oh God.
That in like the closed caption thing. He did air quotes. But I think she had like negative, views towards her towards that. And also, her voice, which I think is like great, but other people find very screechy. I think of her more as a Bjork like, artist ahead of her time. But it's definitely worth, checking out.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. That album, the first one especially, is absolutely wonderful. First of all, the songs are extremely strong, and the original versions are extremely strong. I I think my favorite Yoko Ono song is probably "Kiss, Kiss, Kiss" from Double Fantasy, but the remake of the electronic remake, is absolutely brilliant. And the album, I Am a Witch, the original one, I think reached number 11 on the electronica chart. It's just song after song. It is a testament to Yoko Ono's skill as a lyricist. Her vocals are quirky, weird. I love them. I happen to 100% agree with you, which I won't say ever again.
Yeah. And if you think of some of the bands that are on there, I had to look at my cheat sheet to kind of remind me of some of the ones there, but like bands that I really love, like the Apples in Stereo, Cat Power, Polyphonic Spree, Flaming Lips, Death Cab for Cutie,
Cooties.
and Portugal the Man. Death Cab for Cuties. That'd be a great band name. You should take that for yourself, Preston.
I should write that down. Yeah, use that one. You're really good with titles,
Yes. Or make that your drag name. Death Cab for Cooties.
All right, I'm going to my next one. Go ahead.
Oh, I was also going to give a shout out to Sean Lennon, her son, who appears on the album, who is also a good solo artist in his own right, especially his album Into the Sun, which I definitely loved.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I think you turned me on to Sean Lennon, and that album Into the Sun is brilliant. I haven't listened to that in a while, so I'm gonna give that a listen this weekend while I'm lying by the pool with my Cocktail. Okay, my next song comes from another schlocky California type artist. This is from Kenny Loggins, and I'm going to pick one of his movie songs. And he has a lot of them actually, very successful in that realm. I'm going to pick "I'm All Right." "I'm All Right" was was a theme from the movie Caddyshack from 1980. It was a top 10 song. It was written by Loggins by himself. I need to mention the players in that song because the music is wonderful. The lyrics are really good. Kenny Loggins handles guitar, rhythm guitar, lead vocals. Mike Hamilton, guitar, and has a great guitar solo. The great George Hawkins, who died a few years ago, one of my favorite bass players. He was also a bass player, Christine McVie's band, who died earlier this year. Great vocalist, and he does bass as well. Brian Mann on keyboards, the great Tristan Bowden on drums. And Tristan is a wonderful drummer. He can handle rock, jazz. He also is a great harmonica player. And Joe, you have seen Tristan Bowden at least 3 or 4 times because he was a drummer with the great band Chicago for 20 some years. Then Mark Wittenberg as well on guitar, and uncredited and pissed off that he was left off the credits, background vocals by Eddie Money.
Well,
um,
you think they would have highlighted that one?
well, you think they would have, but it was Kenny Loggins. I listened to Kenny Loggins' biography a while ago, which was really fascinating about his music career. And he was very honest about his relationship with other artists, especially Jim Messina and Garth Brooks. But he talked about the fact that the record label mistakenly did it. It was an accident. And when Eddie Money saw him, he was just pissed that, why could you leave me off? But great
So they were in
song.
the danger zone then, huh?
Oh, good Lord. We have to get Danger Zone in. Yes, yes. That's Sterling
Exactly.
Archer. Danger
Yeah.
Zone.
I do
All
find
right,
it
you're up.
interesting. I have to say, I do like the song "I'm All Right." I think it's a very good song, but unlike his other movie soundtrack songs, it doesn't feel like it has much to do with the movie, at all. It just felt like, oh, we have a good song, let's just slap it in there. Whereas at least Footloose or Danger Zone, thematically fit the movie that they were written for.
Yeah, you're right. And actually, I think he didn't write. I'm not sure if he wrote it for the movie. The other songs he did write for the movie. But this was an age too. The 80s was an age when they were looking for songs to put in movies. They didn't give a damn if they related to the theme of the movie because they wanted to sell. They wanted people to go to the movies and hear it, which is weird. But that's used to have just film soundtracks, and now you have film scores. And now you have soundtracks of unrelated songs
Yeah.
named after the movie. So yeah, that's a very good point. All right, you're up.
And I guess my final choice is going to be probably one of the more maligned songs of all time, even though I think it is unfairly maligned, and that's Starship's "We Built This City," which frequently makes like the worst songs of all time list from numerous publications. But I think the public often will get on this bandwagon of certain artists, like you see with Nickelback, where it's usually held up as like the epitome of really horrible, bands. But they had basic, they weren't a great band, but they had solid, catchy, songs. And there has to be like a lot worse, for it. But it's almost like a shorthand at this point for, bad songs. I
Yep.
think even I used it in one of my novels as a joke for Starships. We built the city where, and it's a comedy, but there is a scene where a bunch of orphans are, burning to death, on a really dysfunctional amusement park ride. And their screams be heard for miles. And to this day, people weren't sure whether it was because they were burning to death or that Starships We Built This City was playing on the overhead speaker at the same time. It was a cheap joke and making the shorthand of Starship, but I secretly love the song. I think it is a great, catchy song. I'm going to be seeing Starship in whatever incarnation. I'm not even sure if there's any band members left, in it, but I'll be seeing them this summer as a part of Brett Michaels' Party Gras tour.
That must have been a $25 ticket.
It was.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm not close, so at least I won't be able to see how much they've aged, since the '80s. But it's them, Night Ranger, Starship, and I think a guy who kind of was in Journey at some point, maybe.
Steve Aguirre.
Um, I think so. That sounds right.
Yeah, Steve Aguirre has done. I think he did 4 or 5 Journey albums.
Yeah,
He was in Journey for 10 years. He was a
yeah,
Steve after Perry, and he's great.
yeah.
Starship has, I think, one member who was in Starship, which was Mickey Thompson. The rest of the people who were in Starship are long gone from the band. But he has the name Starship, and of course, Jefferson Starship doesn't belong to. I think it belongs to either Grace Slick or the estate of Paul Kantner, because they broke off and Starship had. I think they had 2 albums, and this was their big hit and their big album. And I love the song. I'll admit it. I love the song. It was written by Martin Page and Bernie Taupin, who are British, obviously. And the song really was about the fact that they were talking about how they had built a city, and the city was established in rock and roll, but now all these dance clubs everywhere. And it really changed LA. It was about LA, not San Francisco. Starship wanted to be about upstate California, so they changed the word to San Francisco, but it's about LA. And of course, Bernie Taupin and Martin Page too. They're both huge writers, and it's catchy. It has everything you want from a 1985 song. A great synth bass part by the original Jefferson Starship bassist. Don Baldwin was a drummer. Craig Jaquiso was the guitarist, and Mickey Thompson. By then, Grace Slick was long gone. Great song. I know people hate it, but they don't get it. So I would salute you and salute your choice. All
I
right.
think they missed out on an opportunity, though. They should have done like a different version for every country in the world and sold more of those kind of records. So, just change the city names and you got like totally different versions of the songs, kind of like all those versions of RuPaul's Drag Race that just pop up for every country in the world. We built that city. We built the city could also be that type of thing.
Well, they did. They would do promotional tour. Well, they do tours and do promotions, going to record store, and then to radio station, radio station. They would change the lyrics for that city.
Wow. So, they beat me to that idea. So who knew Mickey Thomas was such a visionary?
Yeah, but who would have thought? Though I can't imagine him squeezing Baltimore in there. But anyway, all right. So my choice, I think that is this 4 or 5. I don't know.
I think this is your last one.
Plus my podcast, I can do what I want.
Yes.
But my choice is by another venerable 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000 band, which you have seen countless times. And indeed, you have rushed the stage with really fat women to greet to the lead singer on the stage, and almost been trampled a few times. This is by the band Chicago. And the song is 25 or 6 to 4. Not the classic version, but the electronic version from Chicago 18. Now, most people don't remember the electronic version from Chicago 18. Chicago 18 was the last album that David Foster produced for the band. It was the first album that the band did since after Peter Cetera left. It was the first album to feature the great Jason Scheff on vocals and bass. And what the band thought they would do is do one of their old classic songs, but do it in a contemporary light. So it has a lot of drum machines. In fact, it has no real drums on the whole album. Danny Serafin, who was fired, did drum machine. It has synth bass. It had this screaming electric guitar by Mike Landau. It had these staccato Jerry Hay kind of horns. And it had an arrangement by the trombone player James Pankow, which he contributed so much to the arrangement, he got a writing credit for this version. Jason Scheff's vocals are not Peter Cetera, but they're good. They're good. But this was the first single from the album, Chicago 18, and it reached number 48, which after Chicago 17 sold so many having so many singles and sold so much, the band was disappointed and record company was disappointed. Of course, the next two singles from Chicago 18 were kind of big hits. Will You Still Love Me and blah blah blah, whatever the other one was. But I love this version because it's so weird to hear this band do an electronic version and try to be hip. And look where he got them.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, I'm not as familiar with that. I mean, I know I've listened to this song, but it's not one that ever sticks with me. It's one of those, oh, I recognize it when it's on the radio, but it doesn't keep me from like turning the station.
Oh, good Lord. So you probably don't remember this version. You probably remember the original version. Because I don't think you even hear the version of radio anymore.
Yeah. Seeing that I didn't know there was two versions, I might say, yeah, I'm not as familiar with that one. But yeah, if you want to talk about Hard Habit to Break, then I'm in on that conversation.
But Hard Habit to Break is a little bit different because that was a huge hit. That was the band. I mean, it had real drums, though. Again, the drummer they forced him to leave the studio. It had real horns. It had some synth, but it had piano. That's a classic, actually. And 25,
Yes.
25 or 64 Chicago 18 version is not quite a classic. Guilty pleasure. All right, so that's our list. Anything else you want to add? Any honorable mentions?
Probably the biggest honorable mention, and why it didn't make the top five is because it's not a really great album. But I would say Queen's, Flash Gordon soundtrack
Yes.
is definitely a guilty pleasure. What I love about that is, it's one of the cheesiest movies, of all time. But Queen just said, we're going to go for it. Like we're going to lean in, and we are not going to do it with know, like a half-written type of thing. They went with all the Queen bombast. They put in snippets of dialogue in the film and incorporated them into these songs. And in the music isn't the best, of Queen, but I just love it for what it is. And if you just, know the movie, and you can't think of the movie without thinking of Queen,
Yeah.
and they do it.
Good choice. I would agree with that. That is a unusual project, but it's fun. It's fun. So,
Yes.
all right, for my guilty pleasure honorable mention, I'm going to go with the Traveling Wilburys volume. I think it's volume 1, and I'm going to go specifically to the song Dirty World. And as people know, the album was George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, Roy Orbison, Jeff Lynne. Though how Jeff Lynne got in the room, I'll never know. Well, he was really a major producer. And Dirty World, the album featured a lot of Bob Dylan, even though the project started with George Harrison's solo album that Jeff Lynne was producing, which became Cloud Nine. The album featured a lot of Bob Dylan, and Bob was having a hell of a time doing this because he had done a bunch of really mediocre or bad albums before this. So here he just wrote some songs, some collaborations, some not, and they were just great. And Dirty World is just funny. If I can remember it, he talks about Bob sings, I think he sings lead on 3 songs. And this song he says, uh, he loves your sexy body. He loves your dirty mind. He loves it when you hold him and grab him from behind. Whoa, baby, blah 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 blah. I mean, he's just spitting out these lyrics, and they're just hilarious, verse after verse after verse.
Especially in that Bob Dylan kind of sound or accent, it just fits that song perfectly. And that album is definitely one of my top 5 favorite albums, of all time. It's just every song on there is perfect. And you probably obviously know what my favorite song on the album is.
Tweeter and the Monkey Man.
Of course. See,
Yes.
you know me.
Yes, that's another great Bob Dylan song. He spits out these
Yeah.
great lyrics. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just tells like a great story too. So, volume 3, these kind of follow up to it. It was, a good album, but it didn't capture the greatness of volume 1.
Yeah, it's volume 3 is not really memorable. I mean, Roy wasn't there. Now, in the first album, Roy only sang lead on 1 song, but his presence was missed in terms of the harmonies, and his songs were just not as fun. I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And Roy Orbison's voice was just one of the most amazing of all time. So it was definitely missed. Were they, going to bring in Dion for volume 3, but he passed away before they did that?
Yeah, they were thinking of bringing on Dion. I don't think he died before that, but they were thinking of bringing him on. But they didn't do that. It's when the four of them just went forward. I mean, they could have brought a lot of different people. They could have brought in Eric Clapton. They could have asked Paul McCartney. They could have asked Ringo, but but who knows? It worked out fine. It was a great period in history. It was on the cusp of Roy Orbison's major return. Jeff Lynne was hitting on all cylinders. Tom Petty was bigger than ever. George Harrison had a hit album, and Bob Dylan was on the ascent again before he went down, before he went up again. So yeah, good stuff. All right, Joe, anything else you want to add? We've been going for about 50 minutes, which is a lot of Joe Williams.
I know. So it's about 49 more than I've been allotted. But no, I think we've covered at least a lot of our guilty pleasures, although I will say that I have zero shame in any of them other than Sussudio. The rest I think are underrated and everyone should give them a listen. I am ashamed of your list, so that counts as a guilty pleasure.
Well, yeah, I think we agree, though. I mean, I like your
Yeah,
list actually,
yeah,
except for Sussudio, which
yeah,
I think is a steaming pile
yeah,
of dog crap. I
yeah. And I
didn't.
actually like your list as well, I have to say. So I think it's actually a well-constructed list.
So you've been on every season of the pod, every year of the podcast. We'll probably do this again with another list of guilty pleasures because I have a bunch I did not talk about. But again, I want to thank you for not only being my concert buddy and my play buddy, but contributing to the Slang of Ages podcast. You are a wonderful guest.
Yes, it's been a pleasure as always. I love being on your podcast and listening to my own voice. So that often works out well.
Thank you, Joe.